Okay, now you can see we got the flat and the point separate. What we're doing right now is with the paper towel, obviously, patting it down and getting rid of the excess water. Okay. Make sure that that the seasoning will hold and it doesn't get diluted. Okay. All right. So here we go. As you can see, this is what I was talking about. This is the color and the texture that you should be looking for after having thoroughly cleaned the meat and gotten excess of blood out of the tissue. Obviously, there's some that's deeply entrenched in there that's going to make its way out when it cooks. But my goal is to make sure that the only thing that cooks its way out through the meat, or the predominant thing, is the flavoring that I infuse it with. Now, as far as preparing this, I'm going to go ahead and start with the flat. Okay. All right. So, as we have it laid out here, sorry, with the paper towel. So, I begin the process with extra virgin olive oil. Whenever I do large cuts of meat, especially brisket, I go ahead and massage some extra virgin olive oil over the cut meat, infusing some moisture, helping encapsulate the taste and the flavor when it actually cooks out. But also, importantly, is because of what I'm going to do next. So once I've gotten a good, nice coating of the oil. Okay, there we go. So we got the olive oil is on there, getting nice in the nice of the striations and everything else, and we're good there. The reason why I do that also is I get crushed garlic. Yeah. Take that and rub that in. Some people cut the brisket, slice it and stuff pieces from a broken up clove of garlic and in there. There we go. And then when we get these striations inside of the membrane, you can very comfortably slide these nuggets of doggone garlic in there. So I'll rub that real well to get it in there, so it just makes its way into all those crevices. And then that garlic, because it's a small piece or whatever, and with the aid of the extra virgin olive oil, is going to break down. And then the infusion of the flavor, the garlic flavor to the meat, is going to be real. This is an excellent complement for the rub that I'm going to apply later. But it's important that we introduce this garlic in there early, because what's going to happen is after we get all of the seasoning in there, we're going to seal the seasoning in with Worcestershire sauce after we've gotten it all in there, the rub in. Then I'm going to double wrap it in saran and aluminum foil. Once I do that, I'm going to put it in my cooler for approximately 36 hours. Once it's through with their when it's finished marinating or whatever in that manner, then I'm going to bring it to temperature and I'm going to throw it in the smoker. By the time it finishes with that part of the process, it's going to be very ready to receive the smoke. The meat will effectively have been tenderized. The dissolution and decomposition process based on the acid kind of texture of the Worcestershire sauce and the seasoning is going to basically perforate this meat past the membrane and everything else, and that way that smoke is going to be able to penetrate it a lot easier. That basically is the secret to me getting the smoke rings that I get. But it's all preparation, you know. Depending on which wood I use, I like to use the apple wood because it has a nice, rich, pinkish red smoke ring on these heavy cuts of meat. And then I start it at a low temperature. So the process for the smoking usually is about 16 hours or so. So it's about 12 hours at anywhere between 190 to 200. And then I pull it out, wrap it in butcher paper, and smoke an additional 4 at 225. At that point, all this is going to be cooking in its own juices as it's wrapped. So when I pull it out to rest it, it's going to be easily at about 200 degrees internal. And then while it's in the, and I have these Cambros, so when I wrap it up in the Cambros, the internal temperature is going to rise to about 202 to 205 and stay there for a good 45 minutes to an hour. Now the thing about it is, it gets that tenderness where it can break apart because at about 202 degrees, that's where the muscle tissue, connective tissue is where it starts to break down. So now that we've gotten that flat done, we'll slide that over. We're going to repeat the process with the point. And see, like I said about the rendering, it works out this way because you have this fat here. We can get that seasoning and that garlic in between the folds of the fat as well as the striations of the meat. And get a good deep seasoning, okay? And when that fat breaks down, that flavor that comes from it is going to be ridiculous. I retain it, you know, I catch it once it's rendered, I catch it in the pan. And so what I end up doing is kind of like an au jus with the French dip. I slice it thin as I can, and I lay it in the juice. Then cover it, because it'll still be warm, and it'll soak up even more of that flavor. Almost recycling it. So I think that's a nice perk to making sure we get used to that fat and everything. So. Okay, here we go. See, we're getting that. What you think we should do? Give it to me. I'll do something with it. I'll do what you would want me to do. There we go. So we got our garlic in there. We got our oil in there, little pieces. So here we go. Now take this flat, pull this one over here for a second. All right, and right back on there. We put as much of that garlic on there and in there as possible. And then grab my dredge with the big holes in it, and then start lightly seasoning, applying an even coat of the rub so that it cascades down onto the meat. Once again, from the wrist, not from the elbow. So it kind of basically falls on the meat like snow. Okay? The first light coating, once you get it evenly covered and let it fall into those striation and muscle cuts, is to be massaged in. Since this is thick meat and muscle tissue, I like to get in there almost like a deep tissue massage to work it into the brisket. I don't know how many people do this, but this is my thing. I have found that you get deeper flavor, more flavorful juices, and more flavor per bite when you do it in this manner. So the first part of it is to get that on there. Once again, from the wrist, not from the elbow.
Before she puts them in the dishwasher.
There we go.
What does the dishwasher do?
Cascade Platinum does the work for you.
Washing
The dishwasher did it the first time.
Wow, that's clean.
Cascade
Okay.
Platinum.
We got both sides with a light seasoning. Got to work that in there. So basically the seasoning becomes one with the meat. Okay, get a little shiatsu massage thing going. Okay. See, it's kind of ridiculous, Seems kind of excessive, but one thing you're going to be able to see, I'm going to show you is, you can see how the seasoning is in these cuts and striations, and therefore it's going to be easier for it to be absorbed into and soaked into and become a part of the meat. Okay, it kind of takes on the color and the texture of the seasoning, at least on the surface, but the time that it's going to be in the cooler is going to make it become more substantial. So having done that, then we put on a coat, like some people like to put on a coating of the rub, use mustard and all manner of things like that. I've never been a fan of that because after having used the olive oil and the garlic, and it starts to congeal a little bit, and that helps to hold the rub on there. And you get on there, pat it on a little bit. We'll put on a layer of this right here. That smoke will get a hold to this. And when I'm using hickory especially, that's when it creates a fairly decent bark from that. With a little bit of brown sugar that's in the rub, it'll caramelize it pretty well. And it'll really be a taste sensation, as it were. Alright. Okay. Slide this one over. We're gonna hit that point. Oh. Okay, there we go. Get to where we get rid of all of the bright and shiny and whiteness of that fat, and we're gonna work that seasoning in, around, and underneath the remaining folds and flaps of the fat. So that way, the fat's gonna heat up with the seasoning between it and the meat, and when it renders, that juice is gonna take on the flavor of that seasoning, almost like a marinade of sorts. And like I said, described others also like that au jus, which really helps with the tenderness and the juiciness of the brisket. Because there's no excuse, if prepared properly, for a brisket to be dry. None whatsoever, in my opinion. So if your brisket is dry, you have to take in consideration many things, not the least of which your cook time and your temperature. But at this point, if it's prepared properly, then all you have to do is keep a steady temperature and be set up so that it can climb in a manner that's commensurate with the thickness and size of the brisket and texture. Okay, so there we go. Now, okay, so there we go. We got the point and the flat seasoned and ready to be wrapped. So once again, I'm gonna go ahead and put a little rub layer on there. I'm sorry, I almost forgot about that. And then with that brown sugar, it's gonna make it so it's a done deal. And voila, we have a brisket that's prepared to go in the smoker. And when it's time to do that, it'll be time for another video. And then the next video we do will be going over the temperatures as we're smoking it, and then the end result once we pull it out and slice it for the event. Excuse me. So I look forward to seeing you all then. Once again, I've been the Invincible Chef, and I appreciate your support and your viewership. Tell a friend.